when you look at Mississippi State, if they draw, is this about as good as it gets if they draw Ole Miss, Kentucky, and Texas A&M?
Okay, so let's go back. Let's go back to the numbers. Two things. One, I'm not in favor of 8 or 9. I'm just saying if I was an AD, I would want to stay at 8, especially if I'm a bottom half recruiter. South Carolina, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Arkansas. Leave me at 8. Right? I'm happy getting my butt kicked and maybe being bowl eligible and popping a 10-win season once in a while. You add that 9th game, you're basically adding a loss in there. 0.7 of a loss, over each year. So when you look at Mississippi State, though, back to your question, so I have Mississippi State. So over the last 10 years, they're the 12th best recruiter in the SEC, including Oklahoma, Texas. Okay? So they're the 12th best recruiter, right in between Ole Miss and Arkansas. Almost the same recruiter right there. If they get Ole Miss, Kentucky, and A&M, the average recruiting rank of those 3 teams is 21.1. That is the 13th toughest average recruiting composite in this group of 3. Okay, so if you take everybody's group of 3 that Ross put out, so like Alabama, Auburn, Tennessee, LSU, you average their 10 years of recruiting, so 30 years worth of classes, you get an average recruiting class face. So Alabama's would be the toughest. Now, they are the best recruiter, so that only makes competitive balance sense. They still don't have the toughest ease of schedule. So when I look at Mississippi State, I think that is really good. You're 12th in recruiting, and you have the 13th toughest composite permanent 3. Your ease of schedule, which is your talent, minus the average talent you're facing, is the 12th toughest. So for Mississippi State, I think this is entirely fair. I actually think it leans slightly in their favor if this is the way it pans out.
Bartoo on the Out of Bounds show. All right, let's go Ole Miss. Ole Miss would pull Mississippi State, Arkansas, and LSU.
Okay. So Ole Miss is the 11th best recruiter over the last 10 years. And that group, so Mississippi State, LSU, Arkansas, that group, their average class is 19.6. Okay. By comparison, the average class for Mississippi State, 21.1. So Ole Miss, slightly tougher, okay, in terms of their average team face. That strength of schedule, that recruiting strength of schedule is 11th. So they're 11th in recruiting. They get the 11th toughest composite permanent 3. And then you look at their ease of schedule, their talent versus the talent face. Boom, that's also graded 11. It is absolutely – Ole Miss is the poster child in this for exactly what you would expect a balanced schedule to be for them. Their recruiting matches up to the strength of the permanent 3 very well. So I wouldn't lean getting screwed or in their favor one way or the other. I would say this is very fair and balanced for Ole Miss as well.
But it's not across the board. So who's getting hosed in this thing?
Who's getting hosed? So that's what took me down this rabbit hole, because Nick's up there complaining about it, right? And I'm like, okay, you're the number 1 recruiter. How tough is your schedule? Auburn, Tennessee, LSU. Yep, it's the toughest one. But when you subtract Alabama's recruiting from the average recruiter they're facing, it's only the 4th toughest schedule. When you actually compare the schedule that they're facing to their actual talent, it's the 4th toughest, or the 4th easiest one, I should say. Okay, the easiest schedule when you look at recruiting to the permanent 3 is Georgia. So Kirby Smart ain't gonna say anything. Okay, now the guy who really ain't gonna say anything is Josh Heupel. He's sitting in the corner sipping his 4 roses, going, "Yeah, I'm good with this," because Tennessee has the 9th best recruiting profile over the last 10 years, and they have the 15th toughest average recruiting composite.
Ooh.
Okay, they're at 9th, 15th toughest schedule. Mississippi State's at 11th in 12th in recruiting, 13th toughest schedule. Tennessee's composite recruiting schedule is easier than Ole Miss's and Mississippi State, yet they out-recruit them by almost 8 spots per year over the last decade. Josh Heupel ain't saying a thing, baby. He loves this. Tennessee fan loves this. Nobody's complaining in Tennessee about this, okay? So the guy who should be complaining, Stoops, should be losing his mind right now. Absolutely losing his mind. 14th best recruiter, 6th toughest schedule. Kentucky is absolutely getting hosed in this one. Now, so you're looking at a difference of the 14th best recruiter and the 6th toughest schedule. So that is a gap of 8. Look at Alabama. They're at number 1 in terms of recruiting, and their schedule is their ease of schedule is number 4, and their strength of schedule is number 1. So they're where they should be. Okay, if you're trying to balance something, they're absolutely where they should be. Georgia, probably not where they should be. Oklahoma, 5th best recruiter, 10th toughest schedule. So if I'm going in order of guys that aren't saying a damn thing, it's absolutely going to be Heupel and Venables and Smart. Those are your 3 guys that are not going to complain about what Ross put out one bloody second.
For our listeners, Oklahoma would pull Texas, Missouri, and Florida.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and that was the average recruiter they would face there would be 19.0, which is almost identical to Ole Miss's 19.6. But like I said, the difference is Oklahoma's average class over the last decade is 9.7. Ole Miss is at 21.8.
Right.
I mean, it's, you know, when you start equivalating out the strength, everybody looks at the strength of the schedule, but nobody looks at the strength of the schedule compared to the strength of the team.
Well, how does
right in terms of balance?
Sure. Bartoo on the Out of Bounds show. Do I have time for this? Yes. Hey, what about Auburn? So people fall into this. Oh my gosh, they draw the 2 big monsters.
Yeah.
But then they get Vandy.
Right. Right. They get the
Bama and
SEC,
Georgia.
right.
And Vandy. Right, yeah, they get a bye week. Exactly.
It's the bye of the SEC, right? You know, Vanderbilt has the worst recruiting and the worst coaching staff for the last 3 years, right? And it'll be going in perpetuation until they change the coaching staff, but that's still not going to change the recruiting, okay? James Franklin ain't coming back through those doors. So there's 2 ways to look at it. You can look at the average recruiting faced, okay, which because of Vanderbilt dragging it down, the average class is 18.0. That is the 6th or the 8th toughest composite recruiting permanent 3. That's the 8th toughest. Auburn is the 7th best recruiter. That is extremely fair. Okay. But they also face the top 2 recruiters. But how do you get around that, man? I mean, Auburn, Alabama, Auburn, Georgia has been forever. And quite frankly, if you ask Alabama fan, I went through this with a huge media group, one representing every team, and I mean, which Alabama fan wants to drop or Auburn fan? Who wants to drop Georgia and Alabama? Nobody does, right? I mean, you got to keep that there. So, I mean, it only makes sense to give them Vanderbilt. So, I think that's extremely fair as well.
Don't miss one moment of the Out of Bounds Show with Bo Bounds. Weekdays, 7 a.m. till 10 a.m. on ESPN 105.9. The Zone.